what it came down to me was, do I want to have my free speech or do I want to have my job? Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is I want to have my job.
Social media challenges and mistakes are the focus of increasing discussions in newsrooms, in the media, and on social media platforms themselves. The digital media landscape has raised new ethical dilemmas for the journalism profession, including the role of journalists on social media. In the age of social media, misinformation can spread like wildfire, and in many instances, journalists have fallen under the influence of reporting inaccurate information from social media. The spread of misinformation is one of the reasons why critics often accuse mass media coverage as fake news. Instead of taking an objective approach to reporting and assessing the facts at hand, critics accuse reporters of taking on an approach to sensationalize the emotional and confrontational aspects of a story and intentionally push their position and opinions on readers. According to the Pew Research Center, about 2/3 of American adults say they at least occasionally get news on social media, about the same share this at the time in 2017. However, 57% of these consumers are still skeptical of the information they see on social media, and they expect the news on there to be inaccurate. Garry Gilbert, Director of Journalism for Oakland University, said in today's media political dynamic, digital news spreads much more quickly through mobile devices and apps. As a result, he said, misinformation and disinformation spread more rapidly before the information can be adequately fact-checked. On Twitter, false news stories are 70% more likely to be retweeted than true stories. And it takes true stories about 6 times as long to reach nearly 2,000 people as it takes for false stories to reach the same number of people, according to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in a March study. Additionally, the MIT study said that falsehoods are retweeted faster, traveling 10 to 20 times more quickly than facts. The study also said that humans are more to blame than robots for sharing of false news. Contrary to conventional wisdom, robots accelerated the spread of true and false news at the same rate, implying that false news spreads more than the truth because humans, not robots, are more likely to spread it, said the MIT study. Additionally, journalistic ethics and values are being put to the test as reporters are active on social media for professional and personal purposes. News organizations place a lot of pressure on journalists to be very active on social media to increase the number of page views and clicks they receive. However, following closely behind is the threat of being emotionally charged or biased, posing a question on the role of journalists on social media. Sharing emotions and opinions on social media can call into question a journalist's ability to be fair and balanced in her or his reporting. It also damages the news outlet's reputation as being an unbiased source of news. Unfortunately, we've seen this case after case. These incidents range from journalists expressing partisan opinions, promoting political views, endorsing candidates, and making offensive comments. Even a simple like or follow can cause a public outrage because it can be misinterpreted as favoritism or advocating for a particular side or group of people. In January, the Burlington Free Press fired its executive editor, Dennis Finley, following a series of Twitter comments made on his personal account about a Vermont proposal to add a third gender option to driver license. Finley tweeted that such a move makes us one step closer to the apocalypse, which resulted in an outrage of comments from Vermont residents on Twitter, and ultimately ended with Finley losing his job for violating the Free Press's social media guidelines. The Burlington Free Press even published their own story about their top editor being fired. The news organization is owned by Gannett Company and is a part of USA Today. According to the Burlington Free Press, Randy Lovely, Vice President for Community News for the USA Today News Network, said the company's journalists strive for accurate and unbiased reporting, and Finley's tweets failed to adhere to the company's code of conduct and ethics policy. We encourage our journalists to engage in a meaningful dialogue on social media, but it's important that the conversation adhere to our overreaching values of fairness, balance, and objectivity, said Lovely. Similarly, in October 2016, WEWS Channel 5 Good Morning Cleveland news anchor Jackie Fernandez and weather anchor Samara Theodore were fired after posting to their social media accounts that they were standing in line to get free Jay-Z tickets on company time. The concert, however, was in support of Hillary Clinton. According to Cleveland.com, news director Jeff Harris said, "It is important to our reputation of the station and to Scripps, our parent company, that our news coverage is fair and unbiased. The foundation of journalism rests on key ethical principles that include truth, verification, fair and balanced coverage, and avoiding conflicts of interest. The Society of Professional Journalists, better known as SPJ, encourages journalists to apply these principles while they are reporting so that they are informed with what is and what is not appropriate conduct for journalists. More specifically, the SPJ states that journalists must act independently and avoid any conflicts of interest, real or perceived. According to the SPJ, in order to act independently, the highest and primary obligation of ethical journalism is to serve the public. The Society's Ethics Committee discourages journalists from having any involvement in political activities or movements and showing favoritism. Straying away from these following ethical principles can erode trust with the public and undermine the credibility of journalism." As journalists continue to create increasing amounts of content for social media, guidelines are starting to become implemented for reporters. The SPJ states that the Society strongly encourages its leaders and members to regularly use social media to communicate, not only among themselves, but with the broader journalism community. Furthermore, the guidelines are intended to help SPJ leaders and members follow accepted best practices as they use social media in carrying out the Society's missions. Collectively, the SPJ would like journalists to apply the code of ethics they provide for reporting to also be used on social media. Other organizations such as the Associated Press, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Automotive News, and much more are setting social media policies for their staff to avoid a bad reputation. To better understand these new ethical dilemmas, I decided to meet up with seasoned journalists who work in the Metro Detroit area.
It's a slippery slope. It's difficult to answer the question of like what exactly you should be doing and shouldn't be doing on social media in your personal life or your own convictions. I'm very sensitive in the communication, for one. Like, I put out a story recently on Facebook with a question. It had nothing to do with my job. And I knew that people who looked at my Facebook page would say, A, he's a journalist, and then B, he's a human. So I understand that. Like, it doesn't come without responsibility that you have to think of yourself socially as a journalist first. And so if you're writing a blog post that has nothing to do with your core beat coverage or because I do that, or you're teaching a class or you're giving a speech, you're always a journalist, you know, and so you have to be mindful of that and respectful of that. I think news organizations are in a very difficult position because people have generally been able to, in their personal lives, have some degree of identity without getting in trouble. So the person who puts on their Facebook page the rainbow filter could easily wear a rainbow button all around town and never get in trouble. But if they do it on their Facebook page, all of a sudden it's published, and you're like, oh, you can't do that. As a journalist, I don't have necessarily a problem with trying to have solidarity with groups that you say are marginalized or need to be given more attention. Okay. And a day when a synagogue is shot up in Pennsylvania, it's the same thing. If you want to show solidarity on your Facebook page, you should be able to. But when you begin to get into situations where you are, sort of giving off opinions that would be polarizing or compromise the integrity of the coverage that your paper is trying to do or your news organization is trying to do, then you're on a slippery slope. So that's when you get into politics, and I do believe that journalists should be very, very careful about anything that they put out there. Professors as well need to be careful because you begin to create a expectation and a validation of journalists giving political opinions, which we really shouldn't be doing. Your political beliefs are all over the place. It's gone way too far. Yeah. Journalists on social media have broken every rule that they shouldn't be breaking. They've gone way too partisan. They've rooted way too much for their sides, and they justify it by believing that it's necessary to use their platform to distribute beliefs that they don't think the public quite understands. And honestly, the job of a journalist is to use the platform, the actual platform that you've been given. Few people get the privilege to write for the free press. That's the platform that you need to use to change public opinion or to change policy, not straight bashing of the president or using your Twitter account to spread stories that you don't even know are true. Like half of the stuff that we spread on social media and retweet, we don't even know the validity of it. We don't know the other side of it. I mean, a journalist's job is to bring both sides of the story. And if you're tweeting a one-sided thing, or you're putting on Facebook a one-sided thing, or you're in a speech or a rally and you're advocating for one side, you're not giving a balanced view of the world. And that's what that's why the media has such a poor public opinion about them, because we overdo it way too often on shoving our agenda down people's throats.
Right.
And so the loud megaphone of CNN, MSNBC, Fox News has created a backdrop in which we all think that we should have a loud megaphone, because if Sean can do it or Chris can do it, then I should be able to do it. And that's not necessarily right, just because there's a trend or there's a template for shooting off at the mouth and saying whatever you want. Joe and Mika do it every morning on Morning Joe. That you just kind of have like a reality about your own job and say that I don't want to be that. When I walk, because it all comes down to the integrity of my reporting. If I put my name on a story, I want journalists to believe that it's authentic and balanced. And if I'm working with somebody as a source, whether on background or on the record, I want them to think I don't know where this guy stands. I had a person email me the other day, and I did a story on his company, and he's the CEO, and it was really uncomfortable working with you, because I didn't know where you stood, and I didn't know what you thought of our company. And I was like,
here's the big conflict for me. As a reporter, we are programmed to seek out the truth, right? And you see a lot of memes and things posted on social media that you know are false, and you want to kind of correct them. But you also need to not weigh into political matters, probably, as a reporter, because there are people out there who identify you closely with your job. I think that if you align yourself to something that is controversial in either way, you set yourself up for getting yourself in, if not in trouble, then at least in someone's mind as being in a certain area, right? I think it's better to not be categorized as anything.
Right.
And I would, this just shocks me to be saying this, but I really think that on social media, a reporter should talk about his dogs, his family, what great meals he's had, if you've seen a good movie, anything but controversial stuff, because you do not want people to put you in a box. It's better if they don't know what your agenda is. Although we might not write about politics here at Automotive News, the people who we deal with could be very passionate about it. And it turns out that we need our sources more than they need us. So if they think that we're not going to be objective, or we're so far on the political spectrum than they are that they don't want to talk to us, then we can't do our jobs. So I think it's better for reporters to just stay out of the political arguments right now. The bottom line is, people read what you write, but if they also, as a reporter, but if they also have access to your social media stuff, it could color their thinking. They might be wondering, like, if I'm writing a story about the environment and I completely have blasted the EPA secretary that Trump appointed, am I being objective about it? I mean, you don't want to put those thoughts in people's heads. Okay. Our guidelines have been communicated to us several times in our monthly editorial meetings by Jason and Dave Versicle, and the basic gist of it is don't get involved. Just stay out of it. Okay. And it's a lot of what I've said here. It's because our sources are passionate about, the people in the industry who we deal with and the government people, they have their own agenda, right? And they don't want us to be thought of as being biased in any way. What it came down to me was, do I want to have my free speech or do I want to have my job? And the bottom line is I want to have my job. I can have my free speech, but not in the social media format. In other words, when we get together with friends, when we talk in the newsroom amongst ourselves, we can express our opinions there. So you can have your freedom of speech, but I don't think it's a smart idea to put it out on social media. I don't think that it's good for you professionally to do it in this environment.
Well, there you have it. I think it's safe to assume everything you post, even on a private account, is public. Journalists should avoid the following on social media: sharing of personal opinion, sharing of political affiliation, sharing of religious beliefs, advocating on behalf of a particular issue or agenda, joining social network groups associated with a particular issue or agenda, and or sharing internal newsroom communications intended for staff members only. When considering sharing personal thoughts on social media, your decision should be held to the same standards that have always been at the heart of journalism ethics. Conduct yourself online as you would in any circumstance as a journalist. Thank you.